we've practiced this a little bit. So I know Steve is going to fill me in on his systems, and then I'll be asking questions throughout. I think that we'll probably get through the first 3 questions, and then we'll actually probably run into time. So we'll take a break for Q&A at 8. We'll do half an hour of Q&A. And then actually, if we have any questions that we haven't finished, we'll get back to that and then just go until we're done. So this webinar definitely is 7 to 8:30. Feel free to jump off at any time, but we figure, I mean, it's a webinar. We don't have no one needs the room after us. So we're just going to go for it. All right, I'll hop right in. Let's see here. Okay, so that's us. My name is Dayna Burtness. My husband Nick and I live and work in southeastern Minnesota. So Spring Grove, Minnesota is about half an hour north of Decorah, 45 minutes southwest of La Crosse, way southeastern Minnesota. We have been here since 2015. Yep, 2015. I used to be a vegetable farmer, but then I ended up switching over to, I got a nasty case of Lyme disease and decided that annual vegetables just wasn't really working out for me. So I switched over to pastured livestock. Here's sort of the 60,000 foot view just to help you understand where I'm coming from. We'll dive into this a little bit more because we're going to talk about farm layouts. But one time a farm designer looked at our property and it's just like, that is a very challenging property. And yeah, I like to joke that it's the most unusual property line in our entire county, but we'll dive into that a little bit later. But it's mostly pasture, woods. We rent some tillable, and then we've got a little homestead. So when I got into pigs, we totally got in on a whim. A friend of ours, Drew French at Full Bore Farm, had 3 barrows that he was wondering if we wanted to raise. So in the winter of 2015, 2016, we raised 3 large black feeder pigs, and just I fell in love with pigs. So then we got started on pasture in 2016, raised 10, then 25 the next year, then 40 the next year, then 50 the next year. That was 2019. And then this past year, we started with 73 Hampshire hogs. These were all, last year were crosses between Hamps and Durocs, but this year was all purebred Hampshires. Yeah, that's our farm. That's sort of where we're going. Next year we'll be raising 75 hogs. Making the jump from 50 to 73 was a big jump. So I think we'll sort of fine tune our systems this year with the help of folks like Steve. So a couple things that make our farm sort of different from other, obviously, confinement hog farms. Our pigs are pastured, something that makes us stand out a little bit from other pastured operators, is that we don't feed any corn, we don't feed any soy, we don't feed any fish meal. So it's a certified organic pea and barley feed. And that's pretty unusual for pig farmers. And it's fun because Steve has the same diet or similar diet as far as the grains that are used. And then another big focus that we do is we have a partnership with Featherstone Farm. So each week we basically trade them a hog. And then each week we are able to pick up thousands of pounds of certified organic pig grade vegetables. And that we think makes our pork super extra tasty. And then another thing that we do on our farm is we run an incubator farm program for 2 young beginning livestock farmers. So Bailey from Lissenmore Farm raises meat goats, is going to do meat turkeys, ducks, and then Heidi from Radical Heart Farm raises grass-fed lamb, and then also pastured chickens. And shameless plug, these 2 are graduating from our incubator farm program. So we'll actually have 2 or 3 more openings for young regenerative livestock farmers in spring 2022. So Steve and I bet you have a lot of questions bubbling up in your head, and I can guarantee you we're not going to cover all of them. So Steve and I wanted to do a lightning round that might answer some of those questions, or just at least give you a little bit more context about both of our operations. So lightning round. I know I broke the rule about not putting so many words on the screen, but here we go. So 2021s are going to be our 6th season. We have a pasture-based farm using the wagon wheel model. We'll get into that later. We graze with the pigs about 7.5, 8 acres, so less than 10 pigs per acre. We we're up to 75 hogs each fall. Labor, it's one full-time farmer, that's me. And then we get half a day of help from our housemates. So Heidi and Bailey, and then my husband each week, March through November. And then we have the occasional woofer who helps out. That's sort of a picture of how we run things labor-wise. Deworming, we're not going to get into depth on that, but just wanted to give you an overview that we've tried ivermectin, we've tried Safeguard, we've tried Swine-X. They all have pros and cons. I haven't figured out a protocol yet that I like. For vaccinations, we do know that erysipelas is out there in our environment. So we get hogs that are feeder pigs that are vaccinated for erysipelas, atrophic rhinitis, and then mycocirco. This coming year, we're going to have Hampshire cross hogs that we're actually bringing in from Indiana because it's really hard to find feeder pigs that meet our specs. Our feeder pigs arrive when they're about 80 to 100 pounds in June or July. We used to get feeder pigs when they're 40 pounds in May. And in May, you can still have a blizzard. And 40-pound pigs, I think, if you want to start with 40-pound pigs, you have to be a little bit more advanced. And we haven't had great luck with that in the past. So we switched up to 80 to 100 pounds. They are on our farm for 5 to 7 months until they get to slaughter weight and have their one bad day. We are not likely to farrow pigs in the next 5 years. I was once told that farrowing is, or finishing is undergrad, farrowing is PhD, and I'm still very much an undergrad pig farmer. So it's something that we're always thinking about, but it just doesn't make sense for us for the next 5 years at least. All of our sales are to direct to customers. We used to sell to restaurants, but COVID ruined that. So now we just sell all halves and wholes to, I think it'll probably be about 100 families in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa this year. And we're customer certified. That's what we say. We're our feed is certified organic, but we one of the core values of our farm is that we want to be transparent with our customers. We want to be transparent on social media and educate folks about how we farm and why we farm. And anybody can come to the farm at any time and see anything. So we're customer certified. Feed is 100% certified organic, corn, soy, fish meal free. The grains we use is about roughly a 1-to-1 ratio of peas and barley to get a 15 to 16% protein feed. Our mortality rate has been anywhere from 3 to 20 some. That was a really bad year. We got feeder pigs in that were already sick and spent most of the season patching them up. So I'm proud of that 20% number, even though it's pretty rough. Last year we had a 3%. Year before that we had a 2%. So I'm always wanting to improve on that, but those are our stats. And we're seasonal only. We get pigs in the spring, we finish them out in the fall, and that's by design. We're going for, we charge a premium price for our super quality premium pork. And we want to line up the finishing flavor development window with when fall goodies are really at their peak. So we spend lots of time on picking thousands of pounds of apples from our neighbors and then getting that Featherstone produce. And that really makes a difference in the flavor. We shoot for about a 285 to 330 pound live weight. So that's 200 to 230 hanging weight. But I mean, we've had anything from 250 to practically or over 400 pounds. So we've had some big pigs. The only other species that we manage on our farm is a flock of 40 egg layers. And that's, we eat some of the eggs and then we use the rest of them for training treats for the pigs. But then on the farm, our farm incubator program participants have all of their species. So we're always looking for neat ways to get some synergies there. So Steve, who are you? Will you take it away?
You bet. Well, it's a pleasure to be here and to have this conversation with you, Dayna, and to share what we're doing here and hopefully learn from each other. My wife, Marie, and I own Golden Bear Farm located in Kiel, Wisconsin. And if we go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about our goals, and that more or less gives us a direction for what we're doing with our farm. We're hoping to end up with a successful multifamily type operation with a total of on the order of 4 to 10 people employed with it, targeting on the order of 800 to 1,000 pigs a year, a couple dozen 100% grass-fed cattle that we would also produce per year. And in a nutshell, we're looking for providing a difference in terms of being better for wildlife, better for the livestock while they're here on Earth, looking for synergies and really pushing towards higher food quality. And that's where you're coming from too, Dayna, I know. Moving on, with the next slide. Over the course of years interfacing with customers and trying to make sales and having issues every now and then, we really look at ourselves as farmers for hire. And that implies or means that we really don't want to sell meat. We don't want to sell food. If anything, we want to sell health and environment and wildlife care and things like that. Things that are community supporting also. And so where we are now, going to the next slide, we would be looking at a couple hundred hogs a year that we're raising. We're a handful of people working. We're actually a little bit heavy staff for our size right now. We're not doing any deworming or vaccinations. The great majority of hogs that we're raising are.
We thought this might happen. Steve's internet is in and out, but he'll be back shortly. I think. Oh, the joys of webinars.
And farrowing pigs that's a big deal. And so over the course of time, we started then to work just towards bringing feeder pigs in and trying to develop our clientele list. We've had, over the course of our operations, anywhere from really good performances with their mortality rate being low to where we've also had our bumps in the road too. So we've definitely had our struggles through the course of time, and that just happens. Going
Steve,
on to the next slide.
You froze up, I think, when you were about to start talking about labor and then through the farrowing point.
Okay, so we currently have a handful of people here, and we're a little bit heavy staffed given the size of operation that we are now. We're not doing any deworming, vaccinations. We're focusing on Berkshires. And at this point, for the last 10 years, we've been working with bringing feeder pigs into the farm and then trying to develop our clientele list. And so that pretty much covers a little bit about some of it. Going to the next slide.
Well, Steve, before we get there, what do you think you'll ever farrow? I know we've talked about this a little bit, but that's the question that people ask me all the time. Like, what are why not? Why won't you farrow in the next 5 years?
Overwhelmingly, the most challenging thing that I think, farrowing is hard. I really believe that. And it's another game that you're playing. Raising feeder pigs is one thing. The farrowing is a totally different thing. It also takes different facilities, and so that's part of it. And I think long term it would really be an exciting thing to do. From a practical standpoint, a lot of times it's just as well though to develop relationships with other farmers that are like-minded and to work at synergies between you and the other entities out there. Mm-hmm. That's part of it. But there's something to be said about farrowing for pasture operations as opposed to confinement operations.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Based on what I've seen. So,
So since we went through that great sort of 60,000 foot view lightning round. So question one, given that I have such a weird farm layout, one of the first things that I wanted to talk with Steve about was how has he approached the layout and design and the flow of his farm. So we'll go back and dig a little bit more into this. You all can see my cursor, right? Yeah, so this is the original piece of property that my husband and I were able to buy thanks to a FSA loan support. It didn't have any electricity or water or buildings. So we started off with humble beginnings, and the plan was to build a house on here and build up barns. But then this little homestead came up for sale for a really great price, and it didn't connect with the land, but we went for it instead of building our own. So we've now ended up with this weird situation where we own this land, but all of our, well infrastructure is on this piece. So we've been lucky enough to be able to work with a neighbor to rent this parcel and then rent this parcel. But as you can see, especially given how much stuff pigs require, it's a challenge. So this is what we used to do. We used to move the pigs around completely independently of any sort of permanent infrastructure. So here's one of our earliest iterations. Here you can see shade structure, bulk feeder, waters, and then fencing just run off of a marine battery and then a little 3-foot ground rod. And then when we upgraded to, gosh, this must have been the 40 pig year. Was this no, this was the 50 pig year. We had our mobile water cart that we would gravity drain into the water. There's a tractor moving the shade structure on. Here's another shade structure. The trailer was also functioning as a shade structure. We got our feeder. And then electric fence all around. But more often than not, we found ourselves getting frustrated because this would happen, with climate change and intense weather events. This isn't going away, and it doesn't seem like it's going to get better in the short term. Seeing a 5-day stretch of rain in the forecast, and we found that it didn't matter how often we moved the pigs, this would happen. Pretty much they would liquefy it. We move them over, they would liquefy that. And then like you can barely see it, but this still has some green on it. That's in certain circumstances, an okay level of disturbance for us if it meets your goals. But like this is now getting demolished. There's no more air or pore structure in that soil. It's turning into concrete. So we just figure, we want to be a regenerative hog farm, regenerative pastured hog farm, one that balances the needs of soil health demands, pig health demands, and then also farmer, our lifestyle and our quality of life goals. So we got inspired by the Rodale Institute's hog facility, which they call, or I don't know, is called the wagon wheel hub approach. So here's an aerial version of it. They've got all of the stuff, all of their infrastructure in the middle here. And then they use electric fencing to run paddocks around it. Here's another sort of demonstration of that. So you've got your sacrifice area in the middle, food, water, shade, mud, all that, and then you just move them around. So the way we were able to do that, given our very strange land layout situation, is here is our an old hay shed, a 26 by 72 hay shed that we turned into their main wagon wheel hub. So with all their stuff. And then the idea is that we connect a paddock via a laneway. And here's what it looks like in real life. So there's that wagon wheel hub shade structure. And here's those somewhat uneven. This is a remnant of when we were experimenting with lane widths. But here's the laneway. And then here's the paddock. And this is where pigs have, obviously the pigs just were here. Here's our pastured egg layers that are following them up. And that was the first year we loved it. I can't even tell you how many times we had storms at night or inclement weather. And I was just like, oh, thank goodness for this switch to a wagon wheel hub. Not necessarily when it was cold, but when it was 90 degrees and getting enough square footage of shade for 73 hogs is really hard. So we still have a lot of issues to sort through, but that's why I really wanted to talk to you, Steve, about what's been your process of approaching your farm layout, because it's not like you have your little homestead, and it's not like you haven't exactly have a wagon wheel format either. So I'd love to hear your approach to that.
Well, this right here is a view of our home farm, and it's an 80-acre parcel, which means that it's a half-mile east-west in our case, and a quarter-mile north-south. And our particular farmstead has everything right along the roadway there. So if we're going to have any pasture operations with our pigs from a practical standpoint, in almost all cases, we're talking about actually moving the pigs somewhere down our lane here in the orange, and peeling off to one field or another with it. So so in essence, that's what we've planned with it. And we, at the outset, had planned everything, whether it was cattle or pigs or sheep or goats or whatever we got into, that it was going to be a pasture-based thing throughout the grazing season. So we have here 10 different particular paddocks that you see. We got them all named with it. So we have permanent fencing around all of those paddocks. But in between here, as we look at any particular paddock and we're going to start grazing it, we would, whether it's pigs or cattle, we would be, for the most part, starting in a field and just moving along and progressing through the field. Our farm also, we set up with a water system. So the blue lines that you see on the map there are water lines that are located on the surface of the farm. And then we have every couple 100 feet some hydrants that we can connect into and tap into for water for the pigs and the cattle. So that's pretty much how we have both on the north run that I just identified, and then on the south run, we'd have similar hydrants tapped in for that. So
I want to make sure I'm understanding. So if the pigs are coming from the barn and you decide they're ready to go out to, say, the Rockville field,
yes,
you walk them down the laneway and then cut across?
Yeah, so we have, in each of these cases, we've got some gates on the farm. And so we've got gates there. So we would bring the pigs out and walk all the way along here and come along and then come out to here. And let's say we were going to set up the first paddock out here. So we would set up some kind of a gate sitting in here for the pigs to walk through, and then all the rest of the infrastructure would be sitting out there. So we actually truly walk them like you're taking the dogs out for a walk. It just may be 50 pigs at a time or 30 pigs at a time. And anyway, so we can move on to the next slide there. In our case, we're butchering year round. So every 4 weeks, we send a group of pigs off to the slaughterhouse to our customers. And so we, at all times, will have little pigs, medium-sized pigs, and big pigs on the farm at all times. So suppose that we had, for example, 150 pigs. Well, that would mean we'd probably have 25 to 50 little pigs that are in the barn and barnyard area where we're teaching about electric fence. And the majority of pigs, though, we would have in groups, in 2 or 3 groups probably of 30, 40, 50, 60 pigs, something like that, that would be out on the field. And there would still be another group or two, small group or two of pigs that we had originally out in the field, but for one reason or another, whether it was their hips or their shoulders, something was not right with them. They weren't growing well, they weren't moving well. So as we brought them back to the barn every week or two for weighing, they remained at the barn and their friends went back out to the field.
And so it's
So
not like once a pig leaves the barn, it's just out on pasture until you bring it back in and then it gets on the trailer. This is an in and out flexible scenario.
yes, and so we want to bring all the pigs back to the barn, even if they're on pasture. We want to bring them back to the barn every week or two, if nothing else than to just weigh them. But in general, if we can, when we bring the pigs back to the barn, we will almost always do something with the infrastructure out in the field. We'll move something, we'll change a different fence, we'll do something different while they're locked in at the barn.
Thanks.
So we can move to the next one. And so a typical layout for our paddocks in the last couple of years have been where we have some feeders out there that are on platforms, on slatted platforms. We've got some additional feeders called troughs where we can lay out liquid materials, vegetables, fruits, or just grain if we wish. We've got shade structures out there. The spa really is it's a sheep trough, that 60-gallon sheep trough, but the pigs can climb in, so we can fill that. We've got a watering station, which is essentially a platform with drinking nipples on it. And then we have a fair amount of plumbing with that. So we'll connect into our hydrant for water with our hose, and we'll come out. And so from there, we'll obviously feed the nipples for the pigs to get a drink, but we'll also have some hoses additionally to that. And if we wish, we can go and run a sprinkler and let the water sprinkle and keep the water right here at the water station fresh and cool. Sometimes we want to sprinkle an area that we just planted after the pigs had left that paddock previously. And so there's a lot of reasons why we like to have some hoses and things like that there, even if it's just to wash our hands or get a drink ourselves. So
I cannot tell you how jealous I am that you have those water lines. Hauling water around has been such an issue.
Yeah.
Just moving stuff in general, but water especially. Especially on our terrain, since everything is so hilly. We've had those IBCs that are, how many thousands of pounds, if they're full, fall off of wagons. And I've had one where I've tried to move it out and out of the paddock, and it falls off the tractor. And luckily, it didn't squish any pigs, but it's just that's an amazing thing that you have. And so they're on the surface of the ground. Are those just like black? Is it just black, like inch pipe?
It's on one farm we've got 1-inch pipe, and on 2 parcels, the home farm, we've got a 3/4 inch pipe with it, a plastic pipe.
Does it give you a lot of trouble in the shoulder seasons to have to empty it out?
No, we never empty it out. All we do is we pull off the hydrants and remove the hydrants. The hydrants screw into a receiver, and all we do is unscrew the receiver, and then the water line is depressurized. It's a system that an Israeli company made, the tubing. Mm-hmm. It's a special tubing that's stable with UV rays, and the hydrants are there's a hydrant, and then there's a male key that plugs in, mm-hmm. and that attaches directly to a garden hose, a standard garden hose. So it's very convenient for that. And you can, basically go from wherever your water supply is and just run this hose. The hose itself isn't necessarily so expensive. The hydrants, each hydrant is something like $15, $20 a piece. And if you have a really heavy duty push type weed eater that's got like 135 or 125 mil plastic thickness, that'll destroy that. A typical 60 to 95 mil twine won't hurt it,
Okay.
but the heavier ones will. So that's kind of a big deal. Moving on, we can look at two. So we always have multiple pig groups out in the field after we get past the very beginning of the grazing season until we get to the very, very end of the grazing season. We'll always have multiple pig groups that we're sending out to the field. And so we do want to bring the pigs all back to the barn every week or two for the sake of weighing them and evaluating, are these pigs all doing well? Is there a pig that's having a problem? But there are other reasons why when we have groups of pigs out there, we want to have actually more paddocks than what we have pig groups, because we're finding that as we go and change a paddock, we have to depopulate the pigs there or else risk running them over with a tractor. And believe me, that doesn't make them feel well. So let's say we've got pigs that are populating in paddock 1 and paddock 2, but we have no pigs in paddock 3. Well, what we would be inclined to do would be to first of all, set things up in paddock 3 where, let's say we're going to lay out some treats for them, or we're going to adjust where the shade structure is and all the other stuff in there. We'll do that first. Then we'll walk the pigs from paddock 2 into paddock 3, and that's their home for the next day or 2 or 3, something like that. And then in paddock 2, we can go through and make changes there and set up for the next group to move in and set it up with some treats, things like that. So we're not carrying pails of goodies in among 30 or 40, 250 pound pigs. Believe it or not, sometimes they'll knock you over. I heard one person talk about that. Not that it's ever happened to me. Well, actually it has.
Scary.
But then we can run that group and walk them past. Well, it's more than just being able to set up for the pigs and depopulate a pen so you can make changes to it and whatever. There's another strategic reason for it too. And that is that as you move them from one group to another, we're looking for taking them past and visiting new scenery. So that's an entertainment thing for them. Along the way, they're grazing. Along the way, your goal is to be watching and looking at those pigs. Who's limping, who's not? Is anyone wheezing? Are they staying together? Are they doing some weird things? Is a pig lagging behind, something wrong with it? So that's an important thing that as we're going, we're also evaluating them. Once they get to the new paddock, let's say they're moving to this new paddock, what do pigs do? Well, the first thing they do is you get a whole group of them, and maybe 8, 10 of them go up this way, and another 5, 6, 12 of them go this way, and pretty soon they're all chasing around and having fun and barking and having a grand old time, and then they're grazing a little here and a little there, and so they're out exploring. But what they're doing, at least initially, is less rooting. So we're going to be doing more of this coming year as kind of a longer term experiment. We started doing this some last year, but we haven't pushed hard on that to really evaluate, is this a great thing to do? And if so, should we be moving them every day or every 3 days kind of thing? But we're trying to do some mental aspects and behavioral aspects as we go about our things with it. So moving on to the next slide, we can look at and actually deploy that. So here, this is one field, the northern field, that is broken up into 5 sections. So here we've got paddock N1 through N5 out here. And then we've got a southern field immediately adjacent to it, and I'll call that broken up into paddocks S1 through S3. And so when we strategize moving multiple groups out to the field, we, for one reason or another, when we look at the field, we may say, oh, the ground conditions are the best here, so we'll populate paddock N1 first, and maybe for one reason or another, maybe for isolation so that the pigs aren't nose to nose or just immediately across from each other, we'll populate pen S2. And after 2, 3, 4, 5 days, as we go and see how they're grazing, how things are going, and what the ground conditions are like, maybe we'll move one group over to paddock N2. Maybe we'll make a change for the second group over to S3. We occasionally will take the few small wooded sections that we have, and we may throw pigs in there temporarily and just more or less fence that off for them to hang out for a while and play in the woods for a couple hours while we go and make changes to one of the paddocks too. So we're trying to play with things. We're continually looking at the fields and what the ground conditions are like. This last 2 years, we've had incredibly wet springs and early summers, just things that we haven't seen before. And for example, in the fields that I'm looking at, this paddock N4, that section of that field is low lying. So any time that we can get in there and either graze pigs or cut hay or graze cattle, we're going to do it. So, we're continually looking at different parcels on the farm to evaluate those conditions so that when we have those windows of opportunity, we have to jump on them.
I love the laneway method. I mean, it just gives you so much flexibility and mobility.
What's pretty crazy, Dayna, is that we have found, we initially, when we were taking the pigs down from the barn to the lane, we would close off every single possible direction that the pigs could go that wasn't where we wanted them to go. And we found that over the course of time, as both we people and as the pigs themselves got more experience, for us it was reading the pigs and understanding how they think. Mm-hmm. And for the pigs, it was just being exposed and having experience with this. They will follow a path, and we often will take 2 people to do this, although it's not necessary. There are a lot of times when one of the guys runs a group of pigs out by themselves, if they've been there before. But they'll follow some lane or some path where there's obviously a foot trail or a tractor path, a tire path going through there. And that's natural for them. And as long as you keep them going, it's amazing at how the fencing to go from the barn out to the particular paddock, wherever it is, may not be that extensive. Maybe in this case, so here we've got a permanent fence in place already. Maybe we just run a single electrical line to go across where the gate is and past the next gate. Mm-hmm. And maybe we'll jump across to the start of where that paddock is, and we won't allow them to sneak along the very edge of where the paddock is and the permanent fencing.
I have so many more questions, but we're not going to get to question 3, let alone question 5. We have
Let's
to
keep
going.
moving.
Okay.
Yep. So here's just showing pigs. This is from two summers ago, going out on a trip along. This is our lane. We've got the permanent fencing along the way, and so I was just talking before about this field over here and the one that's further to the right that we can't see to the north there. So we can look at the next slide too and see here we've got some pigs going through another gate right here in this location. And if you see here and then back over this way, there's some non-electrified gates that we've got opened up, and then the cattle or the pigs will be coming through to go to their next paddock there. So you know, and you can see in the background here, we've got a single temporary line, very basic kind of thing set up for them to be guided into spot. So we can continue on.
Great. So question 2, which I realized, oh my gosh, we have 12 minutes until 8. So I'll cruise through what we do. And then would love to hear more about your infrastructure, water feed, shade, fencing. So again, this is what we've switched to. Here's a close-up of our wagon wheel hub plus what we call the lobby. So when it's too wet to be out in the fields, we do confine them to this spot, or the wagon wheel hub plus the lobby until it dries out. So we fill up the lobby with wood chips, straw, that sort of thing. Here's an inside view. Those are we use 2 big bulk feeders, organic bedding. Here are the waters that we use for the last couple of years, but I think this year we're actually going to get to upgrade to automatic heated waters, which is pretty exciting. So they're just IBC tanks with 6 nipples in the side of them with, if you look at my cursor, an automatic filling system. We just plug into a hose. And then there's our fencing that we just run off of a speed rate charger plus a marine battery. And we're actually able to, you know, get, I don't know, 2,400 feet of this netting to keep it at 7,000 plus volts, since we are sort of maniacs. Okay, I'm a maniac about checking the fence volts. I just have no patience for escaping pigs. And I'm proud to say I've not had a pig escape for the last 3 years. So it's been working. That's another shot of the mini fence setup. It's kind of all you need for what we do. We also keep, last year we kept a wallow that was in the lobby, but I'm very convinced that wallows, especially permanent wallows, are gross and vectors for disease. And we're trying to think through what can we do to get rid of this big, disgusting, smelly wallow. Of course, the pigs love it. I don't love it. We've got a chute plus a scale and a ramp that hooks up to our trailer on the side of the wagon wheel hub. And that's the basic infrastructure we use, but I'd love to hear more about how yours has evolved over time.
Okay. All I want to show here is our size of paddock. We could have commonly for our 10, 35, 40 pigs, we could have 100 to 400 foot widths here. And we typically in the other dimension would be looking at on the order of 300 feet. So we can go to the next slide. The fencing that we do is basically, we started off with a single wire, but if we go to the next slide, we now, in most cases with any sizable group of pigs, we'll start off as they're beginning with 2 electric lines going through. And we can go to the next slide. On corners with our temporary electric fence, we will be making use of a T-post and then insulators. And actually, if you look at the insulators, what we do is we come along and we'll wrap around here a couple times. And we before we do that, we make the lines relatively taut. And for the most part, The corners are the T-post. Everything else is a step-in post. And so the runs that we would have in the two different directions coming off of the T-post are going to be relatively straight or very, very minor curvature so that we can keep the electric line taut. Let's move to the next slide. We have enough rigid gating like this that we built ourselves. We like to use this predominantly for teaching. Otherwise, this is a major pain in the butt to move. But we keep the pigs in here, this kind of a setup for 24 to 36 hours at the minimum when we first take them out to the pasture. By this time, all those pigs will have known about electric fence. But when they first move out to the field, they still view the barn as home. Mm. And so when we move them into this enclosure, they are really happy to be out there and explore for the first, first half hour, 2 hours, something like that. And then all of a sudden they decide, oh, I want to go home. And if we just had electric wire up, if we had a group of 30, 40 pigs out there, invariably 2, 3, 4, 5 of them would essentially go through the line, even though they were already fence trained, and go back to the barn. And then they would squeal at the barn, let me in, let me in, let me in. And so like here, this picture shows one group of pigs on their very first morning after we took them out. This was pristine grass all the way through here in our pasture there. And we had a light rainfall overnight. This is what you find in the next morning. So we can go to the next slide. These rigid gates, we also designed here so that we can break them apart, and we can very nicely interface with a T-post at corners and then interface with electric line, temporary line running out, so that we very gracefully graze off of these systems. So let's continue on. As we have experienced pig groups, what we really want to see in all cases is that our gates are not electrified. And in general, otherwise, if we have a group of pigs that's experienced for grazing, all that we have holding them in is electric fence otherwise. In the background, you can see a group of pigs that's in a teaching pen. So, here we're looking at pictures where we got a couple different groups going at the same time. We can move on to the next. This, there we go. Okay, so this is a new water system platform that we're going to be developing this winter yet, and we're really excited about using it. So our feeders and water systems are on slatted platforms now, and I'll show a picture of that in just a second. And so we're going to have some structures on there that we can mount our drinking nipples. And these gates that we have here, in general, we should be able to swing them over and stow them so that they're riding along like this, so that when we're ready to move, this gate is up there stowed up and the other gate is up there stowed up. And we will be able to chain onto the slatted platform and move the platform elsewhere along an existing electric fence. This, in this case, would be a temporary electric fence. And on here, we want to be able to stow or coil up hoses and a sprinkler and things like that. So moving on, this shows something that we've used a couple years. This platform here is just a plywood platform, and you can see that we jacked up one end so that the water runs down off on this way. So when the pigs are drinking here at the nipple and they dribble down to the platform, the water moves away from where the pigs are so that the amount of mud and destruction down here on the pig side is reduced.
And Steve, I know that
And
some people have really strong feelings about nipples versus troughs in terms of being able to, for a pig to actually stick its face in the water, be able to like gulp. Why have you chosen to stick with nipples out in the field?
nipples are much cleaner, and from a maintenance standpoint, when we go to the next slide, actually next two slides, we'll see a couple things here. So here's a feeding trough that we built at home. It's a homemade trough, and we just have a float valve here on this end, and we have this sitting, and it's literally just sitting on top of a sheet of plywood. And so the pigs in this case had plenty of opportunity to go and stick their snout in and drink to their heart's content. But believe it or not, one time I saw a pig lay in there.
Oh, yeah.
One time. And more or less every day, no matter what you do, those troughs just end up getting filthy and stagnant. And you are cleaning them, you're dumping water daily, and it's just a problem. If we look at the next slide too, you can see some of that. So this trough back here, where the pig is our drinking trough, and we only stuck a little end through this ranch panel or hog panel mesh in there. Here we see a nice view of the 60-gallon sheep trough. It's only about a foot tall here, so the pigs can hop in pretty nicely, and you can put in a full-grown sow here, a 700-pound boar without any problem at all, guaranteed. It's when you fit two of them, and that's when it's hard.
So with a
But
group of 30, do they fight over that trough, that wallow area or the spa?
oh yeah. But you know, it for a bit, and as we go and continue on and get to the next slide there. So here I've got two troughs down. This is when it was just hotter than the hubs of hell. It was warm that day.
Yeah.
So this is our swimsuit free or swimsuit optional water park, if you will. So we've got two of those troughs sitting back here, 1, 2. And, you know, all we end up doing is once or twice a day when it's truly beastly hot. And, you know, the pigs will come out from underneath the shade when we come out with the water hose, and we'll just hose them off. And so, you know, they play back and forth. You end up playing with them, and you're, you know, continually inspecting them as you go. But a lot of times too, if you got a drought situation, I am just as happy to walk out here where the grasses are over there or over here. And I'll continually walk, and wherever I walk, the pigs follow me. And as long as I don't stay in any one spot, and we've got very dry ground conditions, I'm much happier to water them out here. And when I leave, I just make sure that we've got a certain amount of water in each of the troughs, in each of these, we call it the spa.
Spa.
So anyway, we can move on. Here's the idea of the platform with feeders. And so here we would be able to run a chain through our runners and pull the platform to new areas, whether it was completely full of feed or not. And if we go to the next one, we'll see what we're looking at now. This particular feeder, the last one was an Osborne feeder. This is also an Osborne feeder. This is a model RF3 feeder that we use. This is our standard model that we use out in the field now. And we've got, the pigs are on top of it, and it's hard to see, but we've got a slatted platform there. It's 6 foot by 6 foot wide. There's a roof now on the top of sitting above our feeder. The feeder itself, we can't see it, but there's a roof sitting on top of the feeder, a lid, if you will. And this roof does two things. It prevents the sunlight beating directly down onto the feeder itself, and that keeps the feed in the hopper fresher. It keeps it cooler, for one. But the other thing is when we get rain, the base down here, the trough where the pigs actually feed, that remains drier, much drier. It helps keep it clean. This particular thing that you see here, this is just to show a couple of 10-foot long troughs that we have that we built ourselves. Normally, these troughs are laying out here in the field. We're feeding them out along there. And so we go and we add grain into there in the morning, or usually once or twice a day. And so that everyone goes out and feeds at the same time. And sometimes we'll give them a treat along the way with it. But our main job is, one, to inspect the pigs while we're doing it, and two, to start their day and kind of get them eating a little bit earlier in the day. And when I do go out, I'll then end up wandering off to where we have some better grass and grazing, and I'll inspect the field, pull a few weeds, and hopefully play with the pigs. These troughs are just hanging up here just for the sake of showing we can hang these on here, so that when we drag this overall feeding station to another spot, we can hang things up on here and drag it all at once. Back here, we see two garbage pails that are sitting one on top of the other upside down. We usually bring out a bunch of grain like that, so that when we do bring grain out to the field, we always have these filled, so I can grab a pail or two at a time and go and fill in the 10-foot troughs or the 5-foot troughs. And it's a convenient way to grab at the grain. You can see in the background too, we've got another group of pigs, the next slide. And here we're looking at a platform that was just a piece of plywood with some 2x material on the edges, and we can see how it got beat up, and this wasn't capable of being dragged at the time. We can go to the next slide. So here's a sketch of what our platforms are that we use for putting the feeders on top. And we're also going to use this for our water system update, or we would call it a prototype or an experiment, if you will. So we basically have runners. This is the bottom view of it. So we have 2x4 runners, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we've got 2x materials going across, spanning. And you can see that we have got gaps in here. We're basically creating a slat design. And the goal is so that whatever is sitting on top there will not hold water when it gets a little dirty with some mud or other things that, believe it or not, our pigs get dirty and they start rooting things once in a while. And so we want to keep where the pigs are putting a lot of hoof traffic more protected. So we're trying to protect the soil structure in the process. And we use some angle iron and some plate material, and we weld it together, and we're trying to be able to drag that whole thing at once. So we could go and look at the next slide. So Dayna, here are two trough designs that we've been using. The original one is off on the left side. This particular original design, my sketch looks like crap, but it has an angle iron feed saver design. So it is kind of like a cup at the top, so the pigs can't push grain out so easily on the one side. And it takes a lot of welding to do that and whatnot. And this other design, we're basically just welding on the ends here. And this second design, the goal is to have it be a stackable unit.
Mhm.
And here we've got a folded over hem design that we're using with it. So we just got the steel into the shop for welding by us just a week ago. So we're really excited about putting those together and trying them out. All right. Just a shot of our barnyard. This is our teaching panel. We have it electrified on the interior for the pigs, and then we can also create different ways of, doing some temporary fencing on the interior here and teach pigs. And you can see we've got some older pigs. This one had already been out to the field before and is serving as a teacher. And this is from a couple years ago that we had some really small shavers come in as feeder pigs. So we could take another peek there.
Yep.
On the interior of our barn, here we have a converted dairy barn. We have many different pens that we put in there. And as part of our training thing, whether it's during the summer or in winter, we're continually moving pigs from one pen to another. And so they have to walk through the different gates, and we teach them to be driven as well as to come when we call them. And we could continue on. This is some of our crude shade structures. This is still a long work in process, and we probably should be thinking about asking questions at this point. I'm afraid otherwise.
Yeah, so I think we're just a few slides off of that. Yeah, so we'll oh gosh, there's so much. Why did we ever think we could do this in an hour? Okay, I'll get to we're going to talk about forages next, but we will do half an hour of Q&A. And then if, just in case you're interested about sticking around, so we'll do forage management, and then question 4 is best practices for training and handling pigs. And then question 5 is, how do you think about fertility and how do pastured pigs fit into the larger soil health movement or farming practices?
All right.
Great. Well, that was fantastic. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and start submitting them into the chat box so we can take a look at them. I had one quick question for myself too. Do pigs play with toys? Like, can you give them toys out in the pens for them to play around with? I know that like horses, you can give them random things and they'll play around with them, and pigs seem like such curious creatures. I didn't know if that was a thing.
We routinely do it, absolutely. So there are a lot of things. We often take, we'll take a gallon jug and we'll hang it from the ceiling in the barn, and we'll put in the gallon jug, we'll put in some gravel. So that gravel makes a lot of noise. It's just a little bit of gravel, but we get it to right where they can hit it with their snout or hit it with their back. And they get all excited when they do that. Or we'll take like the equivalent of wind chimes, where it could be anything made of metal. It truly could be a wind chime though, but we'll hang that, and then we'll have a stick attached to it, and they can grab the stick with their mouth and play with it, or hit it with their head. So yeah, that's a big deal. And we will often, we end up getting milk products too that we can feed. So if we have some cottage cheese container or a gallon jug milk container, we sometimes will throw that in after. We'll take the lid off and the milk is all out, and we will have already fed that out. But we'll throw the jug into the pen, and we'll let them play with that for an hour or two, and they'll run around and mouth it and do all kinds of stuff, and they'll have tug of war and that kind of thing. And when they're done squishing it, and hopefully before it gets really, really disgusting, dirty, we pick it out, put it in the recycle container.
That's something that is just, I'm so inspired by how your approach, I mean, it seems like you really have thought through all the practices on your farm to support a pig's natural pigness, the curiosity, the propensity to get bored, the love of variety. This is exactly why I wanted to talk with you, just because I feel like you really understand your pigs and are constantly thinking about ways to improve their quality of life, which is so cool.
You know, Dayna, when I was looking at your picture with the vegetables that you have out there, that is such a cornucopia of things. And that is just phenomenal for those pigs. And maybe not everyone gets quite that degree of vegetable matter there. I mean, you really have a great thing going with that relationship with the other farm. One time, oh, this would have been about 2-3 years ago, one of the grocery stores in our area called us up and said, hey, we've got some out of date nuts. And these are like pecans and walnuts. And I don't know how you can have an out of date nut, but anyway, they said, here, we've got 2 boxes, you know, just boxes full of nuts. And so that was like the treasure hunt for the pigs, where that was during the winter that we had this. And so we would take one little 1-pound bag, and right when we were putting pigs into a completely cleaned pen, you know, pristine pen, we'd shake the nuts out and spread it out. And as soon as the pigs started finding them, they were just going crazy for it. And that's the kind of entertainment you want to see. It's a productive type of entertainment.
I really feel for our pigs when we do have to, you know, when we have 5 days of rain and we have to keep them confined to the lobby and the wagon wheel hub area. I can tell they get bored. They act bored and they get naughty and they get into things, and they start seeing some of the, or you start seeing some of those behaviors in just in a small way that you see CAFO pigs exhibiting, and it just, ooh, that's when sometimes I wish we didn't have to do the wagon wheel hub, but you know, it's again, it's all about balancing that soil health with the pig health and the farmer happiness. But we should take some questions.
There was a question a while back. Somebody was talking about they grew up on a hobby farm, I think maybe even in Iowa, and they commented that there's a lot of CAFOs in Iowa, and they were questioning, you know, is it possible to have CAFOs hogs outside for half of the year at least, CAFO hogs. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about how that is or isn't possible.
Do you want to comment on any of that, Dayna? I have ideas, but
you go for it. You go for it. I have ideas too, but I'd love it if you would go first.
I don't see that happening at all. Not at all. The idea with pigs being out and whatever, they have to understand something about the fencing. And the CAFO pigs as a whole are almost all the white-haired, pink-skinned pigs. To have any sizable percentage of them out would require so much shade structure, and I just don't see that. We even see with our pigs coming in that they aren't truly bred necessarily for pasture. That's an issue, and we end up when we take the pigs off for a 500 or 600 or 800 foot walk, which is not far, that's nothing. They should be able to walk for miles. And we'll see where over the course of time they have issues with their shoulders, their hips, or we've had a handful of pigs, I don't know what percentages, 0.5%, 1%, where they traveled 300 feet and they're wheezing right and left.
Yeah, my comments would be along the same line. It seems like you know, I've only been doing this will be my 6th year, but that is one thing I've learned. You can't just take any pig and put it outside. There has to be a lot of thought that goes into preparing the right space for the pig, training the pig to be outside, and then also you just have to work with the right genetics. I mean, I know that some people, especially this spring with COVID issues, got 20 to 100 CAFO piglets for free and then tried to put them on pasture. But more often than not, that ended really badly for the farmer and for the pigs. So I would absolutely love to see a countryside and rural Iowa and rural Minnesota filled back up with pastured livestock of all kind, especially pigs, because I think anyone who's raised pigs will know how smart they are and how sensitive they are. And that's been one of my main takeaways of working with pigs, is that they are incredibly intelligent. And so given that they're so aware of their surroundings and whether they're happy or not, I feel like we really, at the end of the day, we're going to kill them and eat them. And at the end of the day, we owe them a good life and a good death. And I think one of the best ways to give them that is to raise them on pasture. That's me. So I want to do everything and anything I can do to help promote pastured livestock of all kinds, but especially pastured hogs.
And we have a couple of questions that are great follow-ups to this. So a couple of people are wondering, do you buy your feeder pigs from different farms year to year, or do you have an ongoing relationship with someone who farrows for you? And if not, is that something you're considering trying to develop? And then there's a genetics question, but maybe I'll let you answer that first.
I personally have been buying feeder pigs from very few sources. We've had long-term relationships going, and I think that's
He'll be back.
Yep.
Internet.
haul. I'm looking at getting pigs regularly. Your needs from the standpoint of pasture operations have to be baked into their genetic selections. That's really an important thing. That's truly a factor to discuss with them.
And we've
Yes,
taken
the second question too was, how do you control genetics for pasture when buying feeders at a large scale?
I think long-term, you have to develop a relationship with a synergistic relationship with a breeder. I can't see that happening buying at an auction market or anything like that. I think this is a long-term development that you're looking at. That's just my gut feel.
I have the same take. We've purchased feeder pigs from a different farm almost every year, and it's really hard to find pastured genetics at the number that we need, at the size that we need, and then finding ones that will do well in our system. And we so we're working with a new feeder pig supplier, but it took me months of asking around and emailing the PFI listservs and interviewing folks. It's tough, and we pay a pretty penny. We pay top dollar. And so I wish there were more people farrowing. And I always tell people, if you don't want to mess with direct marketing and you just really want to be with your pigs, stay home on the farm, consider learning how to farrow, because those feeder pigs would basically sell themselves if you can become known for good pastured genetics and good sturdy pigs. So yeah, I'm crossing my fingers about our feeder pigs for this year. They're vaccinated for the right stuff. They're the right breed. They're raised on a pastured pig farm. And another thing you have to make sure that is you're able to communicate well with the person that you're buying feeder pigs from, because stuff always goes wrong. So you want to be able to have a good relationship with them and talk through any conflicts and have a good contract and all that. But yeah, it's hard. It's really hard.
We had a question about how you deal with water in the winter, particularly days like today where it was -10 or even lower depending on where you are at.
So in our case, we've got the pigs in the barn in winter. We do not have, so our barn is a converted dairy barn. It's basically enclosed, and it on days like today inside, we drop down to 46 or 45 degrees. So it's definitely getting to where the pigs, the little pigs particularly, are uncomfortable. And we bed them heavier with that. And we do have some little bits of, we have a couple electric heaters going with it. But we do have running water in the barn. We've got it plumbed with regular pig waters. We use Aqua Chief waters that we get from, what is that, Hogs. And we like those quite a bit.
And we've never kept pigs through the winter except for that that one first winter. But when you only have 3 pigs, you just give them fresh water a couple times a day and it's fine. But in the shoulder season, when it is freezing at night, we go down to just one 275-gallon IBC and stick livestock de-icer in it. And that, at least when it's getting down in the 20s, maybe even the teens, that's enough to keep the nipples thawed so they're able to access the water. But then this coming year, the goal is to get automatic heated either Smidleys or Richies installed so that makes that water easier to handle.
Thank you. And someone asked, and how long does it take for the pigs to stay in the training area before they learn to respect the electric fence?
That depends on the group to begin with. If the piglets are already fairly socialized, that shortens the time a bit. But we basically sometimes with some groups have to lock them out in the paddock. Otherwise what happens sometimes is we'll have the paddock open to the barn, and one of them will hit the electric fence, he'll squeal, and every single pig will run into the barn, and then they won't want to come out. Mm-hmm. So they can't be learning about electric fence if they're if they're not out there. And you know, usually at the very minimum, I would say we're looking at a week. Most of the time, usually 2-3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks with it. That's part of it. And you know, one of the other logistics aspects of it is, it's not like we immediately take, okay, so let's say we got some pigs that understand the electric fence. It's not like we go and say, okay, this group of pigs knows electric fence, immediately they go out. What happens is somewhere along the line within the next week or 2, we will decide, are we going to combine that group of pigs with another group that's already out in the field? And if so, we'll do some socialization in the barn and barnyard area first. And then a day or 2 later, we'll move everyone out. But more or less, we're simultaneously teaching the pigs for the electric fence. And then also, can you go out for walks with us? So sometimes we'll take them out for a 100-foot walk. In our case, it's, can we get them out of the barnyard and behind the barn? And then if they make it, great. Bring them back in the next, we may take them out 2 or 3 times that day like that. And then the next day we'll take them out up over the hill. We'll go another 300 feet, 500 feet, whatever. So we'll sometimes do 5, 6, 7 walks with them out. And when we stop seeing them when we see them being calm, so when pigs are nervous, what they do is they're like a bunch of bees that swirl around. When we see that, we're not going to take them very far because they're not going to make it. Until they calm down and start to relax and start to explore on their own, that's when we know we're ready to start taking them out to the field. That and when they know something about electric fences.
I don't have anything to add to that. Just, yeah, minimum 1 week.
Great. Dayna, how are you preparing the barley and field peas or feeding them to the hogs straight out of the bin? Or are you feeding the hogs straight out of the bin?
Straight out of the bin. I think this is what someone's asking, but we buy in all of our feed. We don't grind our own feed. So we buy it in by the ton, and it's ground up pretty finely, and it's augured directly from the feed truck into the wagon wheel hub feeders. And so we're not handling the feed or processing it or anything. A way that Steve and I actually differ maybe the most in how we farm is that we get a delivery of 2 to 4 weeks of feed at a time. I don't like to keep feed on the farm for more than a month because then it can get kind of stale. So we have it sitting on the farm for 2 to 4 weeks, especially depending on how or hot or cold it is. But Steve, that was one of my main questions that I wanted to ask Steve is, I remember you only put out so many days of feed, like a day and a half, and then you trough feed. So I think we only free feed, but Steve does both. And I made a note to myself to ask you about that so other people could hear your thought process because it's super interesting.
Well, so Dayna, what you're doing is that looks like it really makes sense for your infrastructure, for your buildings. You're able to get that delivered there, and you're not dealing with the degree of wind that we would have for that feeder located in the middle of a field somewhere. We've had where 30-mile-an-hour winds, and there isn't anything to eat for the pigs out in the field. It all blew away. And that's frustrating to see when that happens. The pigs don't grow very well when they're not eating either. But the other thing that really limits us is the topography that we have. And we had just in the one field, and we tried that one year where we actually during the summer had the truck drive out to the field and auger into our bulk bins. That was the only year that we ever did any of that. And we can only do that when we've got the right ground conditions. Yeah. So for us, from our standpoint, I can't call up and ask, hey, truck, go out there to that back field. Like there's a picture along with our lane where there was all kinds of mud and ruts and stuff. That's what we would be dealing with. And, you know, it's one thing to carry stuff in the bucket of the tractor or whatever. We can do some of that. And mud is a 4-letter word, and it limits a lot of things. That and some of the hills and slopes and things like that that the delivery trucks wouldn't be able to make. Mm-hmm. So we're stuck, you know, with our system pulling out smaller amounts at a time. I would like to do some kind of, I don't know if I would call it a grain buggy or whatever. That would handle 1,000 to 2,500 pounds or something like that, that we could take out to the field close to where the pigs are and more or less park it and have shorter distances that we're transporting and that kind of thing.
Because it blows my mind that right now you are bucket feeding that many pigs, basically, right? You're lifting and moving all of that feed. By hand.
100% of the feed that we have is lifted by hand.
Oh my God, that just blows my mind. You must have
That's
Popeye muscles.
so our I'm less worried about it in the field as opposed to through winter in the barn.
Okay.
I really want a barn augering system, and everything that we have right now with this converted dairy barn, it'll never be we're treading water from a business standpoint with it because we're so heavy with labor just to clean the barn and bring in feed and that kind of thing. Our client list has been rising and we're excited to see that. I need to make the next step though before we pull the trigger on more pig friendly and people friendly barns.
Mm-hmm. Once we got to 25 pigs, I decided that bucket feeding, lifting and feeding out every single pound of grain was not for me. And I think that's when we switched to the bulk feeders. So we have different tolerances for manual labor, I think.
You've got a nice system, Dayna. It looks good
for us so far.
Steve, Dayna, we've hit the end of our session for Q&A, so thank you both so much. Audience, thank you for tuning in tonight. As Dayna mentioned earlier, though, they do have several questions that they were hoping to cover that they didn't get to. Dayna, do the two of you want to do one more of your questions tonight, or would you? It's really up to you. As you mentioned earlier, this can continue running. We can see what audience members want to stick around, or you could please let us know in the chat. Do you want to hear more? And we can make a decision from there. But I do appreciate and tonight that isn't able to stick around for longer.
Yeah, thanks to all of you who have to jump off. Sorry that we were only able to cover 2 of our questions and barely get through all those. But could we just ask folks if they want to stick around for one more of our 3 remaining questions? Just chime in the chat, or so to remind you, it's how do you manage forages? So annuals versus perennials, rotations, reseeding. Then what are your best practices for training and handling your pigs? And then how do you think about fertility and how pastured pigs fit into the larger soil health picture? And then
well, 2 attendees have already said that they were looking forward to forages. There's lots of excitement for forage.
Let's do forage.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'll bring us back to it. It's certainly the thing that I need the most help with. So thanks for those of you who are sticking with us. So yeah, what's your approach to this, Steve? I'll share a little bit about what we've done. So here's that overview of what we did in the 2020 season. So it was a whole mix of warm season annuals, cool season annuals, perennials. One of our strategies was to this was fall planted rye that we let overwinter and grow up and mature. And the idea here was to maximize calories out in the field, letting the hogs hog down, because by far our biggest line item in our budget is the feed. I budget for at least 1,000 pounds of feed, and our feed is 30 plus cents per pound. So it's a huge amount of money that we're spending on really super high quality feed. So I was trying to think of how can I cut down on this feed bill. They ignored it. They didn't want to eat any of the rye. The only grain that I had any luck getting them to actually eat were oats, but oats are pretty low in caloric density. Our favorite seed mix that really stood out that we'll be emulating quite a bit more of is, so this was frost seeded, and it was oats, Rye Grass, grazing greens, which technical name dwarf Essex rape, but what a gross name. Clovers, so I don't know if it's Ladino or Ladino or something like that. Ladino, thank you. White Dutch and Kira clovers, I think maybe one more. And then forage chicory. And then of course, all sorts of annual weeds that popped up, which they loved just as much as the rest of the forage. So here's some other mixes we've tried in the past, but we're really going to start going more for salad instead of calories. So I think this is, I'll skip this, but this is our sort of thoughts on what we might attempt to do this year. Mostly that northern third is what I want to play around with potentially a warm season annual mix like buckwheat, sunflowers, millet, cowpeas, and broadcast clovers after the pigs leave, and then leave the biomass to cover the soil over the winter. So I'd love to hear your approach to pig grazing and forage management.
To start it off, in some respects, even with a whole bunch of pigs out in the field, let's say you got 40 of them, and they're kind of midway, halfway size there, you're only looking at about 3 tons of pig hanging out. And on a daily basis, they're only going to eat a total of a couple 100 pounds of feed. And if you're doing a really good job grazing, 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds of dry matter from that. Basically, you're looking at 1 or 2 small square bales a day that they're grazing off of the field. So compared to cattle, they're not eating tons and tons and tons of feed at a time, although you're transferring, you're changing out feed from 20, 30, 40 cents a pound versus something that costs you maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 cents a pound to, produce on your own. So that's a big deal. Let's move to the next page then. And so with the pigs, it's really hard for me to say how much do they actually graze on a per acre, tons per acre per grazing basis. With pigs, we're looking at really dealing with tender shoots, so there's less tonnage out there to begin with. And in our case, especially, not so much in your case at all, but in our case, we have to be really careful with what kind of field traffic we have and trampling and stunting the regrowth on it. That's really a big drawback for what we do compared to, for example, your setup, Dayna. If we go to the next page, in our case, wherever we park the pigs, that's an area that over that year and the following year, one of the 2 years, we want to do something again with the replanting on that. And usually those are areas where the perennial content, the legume content of the stands are weak. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at there. With regard to, let's go to the next page then with it. So we've got 4 basic strategies that we use for it, for how we manage the pastures. And then we can talk about what specifically we would go back and replant with. But in some cases, if we've got a field or a field sections that's tucked away that we won't have to access or drive over through the rest of the year, if we have the pigs on that pasture and we pull them off of a particular parcel, and we can then that same year immediately go and replant that to perennial, what we can do is basically go through and completely renovate it. So this would be one strategy that we use. And I only want to do that between certain time periods of the year when before June 10th, I think I can establish something that'll last well, and I'll be able to take a cutting mechanically off that for baling. And later in July, I should be able to establish something and it'll still be able to overwinter well with things. That's one strategy that I would take with it. If we go to the next strategy that we have, here would be where I only renovate uprooted sections or wherever it's rough. So when the pigs get done with an area, what I actually rototill or subsoil would be just small little sections of it. So it's kind of like a mosaic in there. And if it's before June 10th, where whatever I plant in there has a good chance of going through, I can probably go through and mechanically harvest that area of the field again, great. Or if it's later in the year, later in the summer, and I can still establish something before winter, great. But this is one strategy that I use. And again, on a parcel by parcel basis, we're trying to look at this and decide what do we do with this and why. And overall, I'm trying to be less disruptive with the soil building, basically till as little as what we can and still get something desirable about it. In the next two slides, we got a third strategy and a fourth strategy where we're looking at here, strategy 3, here we're looking at doing replanting to annuals. And so we're in a case like this, we're looking at the calendar again and deciding this is how we're going to do that. I do not replant anything after September 20th for any year. I tried to do some annuals such as forage rape, kale, or turnips or things like that actually can handle a lot of cool weather. But there's a difference between getting it established versus having an established plant being able to handle cold temperatures and continue being palatable to the animals. So in the last strategy, here it'd be where I would be looking at completely tilling something and replanting it with annuals. And there, my big thing often would be where I'm trying to reestablish an alfalfa stand, and we already have some kind of alfalfa content that's pretty much distributed there. So I'm trying to kill off what is there so that we don't deal with autotoxicity problems on that stand. Anyway, so we could go to the next page, and that would be the things that I would be looking at trying to plant. So I'm really excited with the pigs and cattle with annuals. Things that I really like to see. I really like turnips, and for when they graze it, they really like the greens with it. And I really like kale. I really like forage rape in the mix. The pigs and cattle, they love all of these things. And oats and field peas, for the most part, the oats and the field peas the pigs love, oats cattle love as well. I saw too that you, Dayna, had been putting in some annual rye grass, and I'm just starting to get involved with that and adding that to the mix. I don't know how well the animals like it, but annual ryegrass has got phenomenally deep tap roots. And so from a natural way of fighting hardpan and doing positive things for the soil prep for coming seasons, I think that's really an exciting thing to do. So I like that. I also do like the idea of the annual clovers. I'm not so excited about wheat, rye, triticale, barley, and that kind of stuff. I'd be more excited about winter rye, winter wheat, winter rye kind of thing for the following year for either early grazing by cattle or pigs early in the season or mechanically harvesting it as a hay. With the pigs, it's from my standpoint, I really see that pigs like the pumpkins and squash, zucchini and cucumbers. We grow thousands of pounds of this stuff for our pigs every year. If I were as good at growing lettuce and spinach, in a heartbeat, I'd be planting that like crazy. For one, I haven't found cheap seed, and it's all I can do to get lettuce and spinach to grow in my regular garden. I don't know what happened to me, but I'm not doing well with those things. Tomatoes are something that the pigs just absolutely go crazy for. I do really like to get apples and pears from the local orchards. Generally speaking, I only pay $2 to $3 a bushel for them when I do get them. That obviously is nothing for them to get excited about, but how it works out is you approach them and you say, look, I'd love to get your apples and pears, as many as I can get from you. I can't pay you much for it. And if they, for example, still have those crops on their trees and they still have room in their coolers, they may go and pick those for you. But in the meantime, they're going to work their butt off trying to market that for human consumption. And if they do it, great, they can make substantial, much more money for that. And if they don't, at least they can cover picking costs for those crops. And so it's a synergy kind of thing. And you know, the other thing that I've been trying to do, although it hasn't been successful, has been trying to tell them, look, you can market our pork through your stores as well. And you know, these are apple-fed pigs, which is true. But most of the time they close their stores up in, you know, early December, and they're not so excited about that. So anyway, that's another story. On the next page. Pastures, whether we're looking at it for pigs or for cattle. These are the basic mixes that I've been using recently for our fields. And then on a field by field basis, I may choose to add in some of these other things, the ladino, white clover, more alfalfa. We may go really heavy on the alfalfa depending on what kind of soil type it is, or red clover, that kind of thing. When we establish a permanent pasture now, we basically will have blends of blends going in. We may have 15 to 25 different kinds of plants seeds that we throw in. What comes up is actually dominated by 5 to 8, 5 to 9 different kinds of seeds. But over the course of life, if we look at from 1 year to the next 5 years down the road, what we see becoming dominant progresses with time. So that's what we end up doing on our farm with it. Initially, I was really nervous about doing this because this was just before we started having pigs, but we were also trying to dry bale a much larger percentage of our farm. And that was truly a nightmare. And we, in the last 12, 13, 14 years, I forget when, we started to do a lot more baleage for first cutting. And then my worries about how quickly do some of these clovers dry down, that went away. And on the whole, I can tell you that I've been pleased with what the cattle acceptance and the pig acceptance has been for the various kinds of clovers and alfalfa and whatnot that are in the legume blend. The grass blends that I've found in here and here have been, for the most part, pretty palatable, I thought, for the animals. And so I've been excited about that.
As far as warm season annuals, do you have any advice for me or thoughts for me about what to experiment with that you've noticed to be really palatable for the pigs? And also, are you at all worried about prussic acid poisoning for pigs with sorghum or sorghum Sudan grass?
I've only put in, I put in 1 year Sudan grass, and another year I put in a sorghum Sudan hybrid kind of thing. I've had modest experience with it. The Sudan grass, I drilled that with my grain drill for a couple rounds, and I was worried about that with my particular drill. I was worried that I was beating up the seed. The seed size relative to my drill was right on the edge, and I wasn't sure it was working. So I used my broadcast spreader as well, and I increased my seeding rate in pounds per acre. And I was really extremely disappointed with the broadcast results with it. It was horrible. The other time with the sorghum Sudan grass, I used my grain drill with it. That was a little bit different seed size, if I recall right. And that drilled okay, but I drilled that into a pasture that the cattle had overwintered in, and the preparation for it wasn't good. It was about the soil prep, and I think that was what limited it. I mean, I got a ton and a half per acre on the first cutting, and I got a very modest second cutting on it, but I wasn't pleased with it. And my warm season grasses, I'm really weak on. I just can't really speak about that. For the cattle, they talk about with grazing, and I will say this with the pigs, the annuals, they like better than the perennial pasture, unless you're looking at the really tender regrowth shoots. And with the cattle in midsummer, when it's hotter than all get out, the cattle sometimes start turning their nose up. They're not interested in grazing anymore and all. I've had some of the best growth performances with the cattle and interest with the animals with the forage, where I would say, okay, cattle, you go and graze 40%, 70%, whatever, some substantial percentage of your diet, you graze, and the rest of it, what I'll do is I'll cut and I'll bale it just before I feed it to you. And I would bale it, even with my small square baler, where it wouldn't last for more than a few days because it was just a little bit too wet. But when it's just at that threshold of being dry enough to bale with a small square baler, it's very aromatic. And the animals just love it. And like with the pigs too, if I needed a little bit of bedding in the barn, and for animals in the barn, whatever bedding I would use, if I was going out to bale hay and I was playing that game with the cattle, I for sure would bring it back a bale or two for the pigs, just for that, because they absolutely adore it. They would mouth it a lot. They would do a little bit of eating with it, but it was really aromatic, and I think it was enjoyed by the animals.
Steve, Dayna, yeah, I was just going to say, if there was like one last key point you wanted to share, and then pop back onto your contact page so that people can grab your information. There's a couple of questions we didn't get to. There was another question that just came up in this last extra half hour. So I want to encourage everyone, reach out to Steve and Dayna, and they'd be happy to take your questions. Yes.
Steve,
I don't know if there's any.
I just want to make sure that's the way you spell your last name. It's E-I or I-E? Because on your Zoom, it's spelled one way and then.
This is correct. Yeah.
Okay, on the screen.
It's a Southern German name. It's kind of an odd, not very common name.
Yeah, please everyone reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions, or as long as you're okay with me asking a few of my own, if you reach out.
Well, thank you so much, everyone who has stayed on this extra bit of time to hear about forages. And again, Dayna and Steve, it was really great having you both on together. I really enjoyed this format, and I hope you both got a lot out of it too. Thank you for joining us for Farminar this year.
Thanks for the opportunity.
It was wonderful. Very nice. Thank you.
Good night,
All right.
everyone.
Okay.
Thank you. Good night.